is I want to give a shout out to Barack and Ashley and their whole team for what they are doing for entrepreneurship globally through this pandemic, because this is a really tough time for a lot of startups and entrepreneurs, but what Startup Istanbul is doing is really amazing. And they are keeping in front of the story, and they are doing relevant things, and they are, they're driving their content in a way that is helpful to entrepreneurs. So I just wanted to thank them for that. Also, Dan, this is great. We're here virtually. I would much rather be sitting in Turkey with a Turkish tea, interviewing you on stage, but you know what? We're just going to work with it, right? That's cool. What we do. We're entrepreneurs. We pivot. We're pivoters. First of all, my name is Amy, and I am a longtime supporter of the work that is done at Startup Istanbul and Startup Turkey as well, and a huge fan of entrepreneurship. I'm a writer, an editor, and I have gray hair from the pandemic. It's my pandemic look. And I'm super happy to get to interview you today, Dan. And so let's start with you. One of the things that was really astonishing to me when I was going through your bios and looking at your videos and all of that is that you are incredibly authentic and transparent, because you talk about failure as if it was like a second language to you. You talk about the mistakes that you've made. Like, I think that, if you could talk us through some of the bigger lessons and tell us a little bit about your background. I know you're SaaS centric and you're a technologist and you're an entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur. So let's talk about you.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, Amy. I'll give I'll try to keep it 60 seconds of why I'm even here today. I grew up in a really challenging environment from Eastern Canada. Got diagnosed with ADHD when I was 11. Had an anger issue. My mom's an alcoholic. My dad, wasn't at home very often. And I got put into a crisis center when I was 11 or 12, and then group homes 13, 14, introduced to drugs when I was 13. And really found my life spiral out of control to the point where at 17, I was in a high-speed chase in a stolen car, high on drugs. And I ended up crashing into a house. And next to me was a book bag with a handgun. And I said to myself before I sold the car, if the police caught me, I was going to, let them take my life. And for whatever reason, when I went for the gun, it got stuck. And the door opened up and the police grabbed me out of the car, and my feet didn't even touch the ground, threw me in the back of the cop car, and I woke up sober the next day wondering what my life was going to look like. And the reason I share this story is because, the entrepreneur today, just it's really interesting. In the early days, you just don't know what's going to happen. And I ended up doing 6 months in adult jail due to severity of my crime. And then I got released to a rehab center. And it was there that I rebuilt really my emotional stability and built the trust of my family. And at the end of that program is where I discovered this yellow book on Java programming. It was an old church camp. And the maintenance guy, Rick, asked me to help him clean out one of the camps. And there was this 486 computer sitting there with a yellow book on Java programming. And I just opened it up and followed chapter 1 and got the computer to say hello world. And I thought, what a crazy idea. You could just put stuff in the computer and it would do what you say. And what happened is software literally became my new addiction, and entrepreneurship, even though I was always entrepreneurial, nothing legal. It became the ultimate, it became the also personal development program. So to me, building software just provided a sense of normalcy and consistency. The reoccurring revenue was this predictability that was really what I was yearning for growing up coming from a really chaotic and troubling childhood. And is why I think I've made it my life to really teach everything I know. That's why I have the YouTube channel, and why I've gone on to build 5 companies and exit 3 and invest in 40 plus other software companies.
What can I go back to your story, which I so deeply appreciate, and I think it is so relevant right now. Talking about kind of hitting bottom, and there are a lot of entrepreneurs and startups around the world right now who are feeling kind of bad, right? Like that entrepreneurial optimism is sort of because people are scared. And so what would your advice be? And I talk to startups all the time, and a lot of founders right now are feeling that same pain that you felt. when you made the decision to turn your life around? Like, what is your advice?
Yeah, I mean, my whole thing, because I actually coach 170 of the top B2B SaaS founders in my program, SaaS Academy. So ClickFunnels, Proposify, Carrot.com, mostly bootstrap founders all over the world. Every continent's covered at this point. And I'd been through it. 2001, I started in the internet in 97. So I went through the first .com bubble. 2008, went through that again. And then, so and personally, just I think if you build companies, you'll literally come across company killing moments, 2 or 3 times throughout the history of business. And so it's never been I've never been a stranger to those moments. But what I did is I went to my coaching clients and I said, look, first off, we have to pivot. Okay. So here's probably the best analogy, Amy, that I think would help support everybody is, I race cars. I have a McLaren. I'm a big fan of racing because to me, it's easy to go fast in a straight line. A great driver can go fast around a track, right? So there's a lot of analogies, where they talk about in the turn, you don't stare at where you don't want to go, you stare to where you want to go because the car is going to follow that input. So what happened is as soon as the economy kind of goes into, this crazy freeze, it's like we're coming into the turn and the first thing we do is we get rid of our speed. So we brake and we brake in a straight line. So that's cutting expenses, right? That's cutting new projects, hiring freeze, etc. We want to dump our speed so that we can set ourselves up for the turn, but we got to do it in a way that we don't unsettle the car, because if you turn when the car is unsettled, you'll slide off the track, right? It's really fascinating, the aerodynamics involved. And to me, that's where we want to cut the fat and we want to maybe trim a little bit of the meat, but we don't want to accidentally hit the bone. And I think that, so you can cut too far, because what we want to do is we want to get ready for the exit. So the second step is you then look into the apex. The apex is when we think we're at the bottom and we can kind of see through. The challenge with this turn in the economy is that we had no visibility into that. So it's kind of like racing a car and doing a turn, but we're doing it blinded, right? So we don't have, it's like fog. What I've seen recently, and I told my clients, is like right size the business, look for the apex. And once we start to see something's there, which is happening right now, pretty much started last week, different parts of Canada where I'm at, San Diego where I live in the winter months, like you start to see different parts opening up in the globe in general, okay? So then it's about getting ready to not only get to the apex, but then look for the exit and power on. So in racing, you literally full throttle out of the turn because you want to take advantage of the opportunity. So what I know going through this, 2001, 2008, is that if you are strategic right now, in the next 16, 18 months, we create more wealth than you'll ever be able to in the rest of your life, period, full stop. There is an opportunity for those that are willing. What does that mean? That means not complaining. That means getting up every morning and having structure. That means doing everything you possibly can to add value to your market. That means being really generous with your time, serving your customers. It means literally leaning into this and deciding I am not going to participate in the downturn. I'm going to participate in the upside and believe that when there's no proof whatsoever that that's going to happen. So, I mean, Amy, I've been doing this for so long. And honestly, my story and the reason I shared that at the beginning is to let people know that for pretty much 2 to 3 years, I had a belief in my capabilities that were not proven by any external factor, no validation, no reason for me to believe any of this. I don't know where that came from. Maybe it was the people that believed in me more than I believed in myself. But because I had that belief of what was possible, it's why I've created the world that I live in today. So that's my message to everybody right now is we're now seeing the apex of this turn. Everybody that's ready to connect to that apex and look for the exit and the economy starts to come back and you step on the gas and take advantage of it, you will create more economic value for your life than any other period in the future. Because I don't think we could ever get worse than what we like. Literally, it's crazy to even talk about what we're going through right now. Like the whole world, it's like a movie. Like it doesn't make sense. It's not a real estate crash or a .com boom. Like those things I can kind of see. But the thing is you got to believe in yourself when there's no proof externally, and the only way that you can get through it is to control the variables that you have control over. Yeah. And for everybody watching, that is literally your habits, your morning routine, your conversation, consuming news or not. I've never the news thing, right? people are like, oh, you got to be informed. Look, I can call my friend Marty, and within 6 minutes, he'll tell me everything I need to know about the world. I don't have to sit there and watch 3 hours of news. I have never watched the news and turned to my wife and said, I feel better about the world today now that I've watched that. That's never happened. Don't feed your mind bad information. Like, to me, there's so much personal development in this that's allowed me to really get ready. And look, it's bad, and there's real human lives at risk and people dying, but that doesn't discount the fact that if we're talking a business context, there's more capital in the market available. There's more reason, like hiring right now is amazing. The people I'm getting 30-40% cheaper, calibers higher, and 4 times the volume of applicants. I mean, that's never going to happen for me again in my career. So I'm all in.
I mean, and I think going back to your first analogy, talking about race car driving, and I ride motorcycles, so I know what it means. You go where you look. If you focus on a pothole or a speed bump, you are going to hit it. And the same is true for entrepreneurship and startups. Like, I have seen so many founders who, start to focus on the bad stuff, right? And that's one of the things about entrepreneurship attracting is fearlessness, right? This eternal sense of optimism. And my, just dovetailing what we were talking about, Dan, there has never been a time more important than right now to create and innovate and be fearless, not reckless. I mean, you're a race car driver, so you're probably a little reckless.
I'm alive. I have wrecked a few cars. I try not to.
But I just think that, and this is the message of startup, is that a sense of optimism and hope, and encouraging creativity. And even though stuff is really bleak and kind of shitty right now is the time to go out there and take a few risks, be creative, and success. We need founders, we need entrepreneurs, we need greatness to get us from somewhat dark point, which is going to be, I think, amazing to your point, Dan. Okay, so let's talk about leadership, because that is a topic. Reading up on you, doing all of the background and your CV, that is a topic for you. And so, question on leadership is, what makes a great leader? How do you know a great leader when you're a great leader?
I think if I think of, like, I've had so many incredible people to model against. My first boss, and I say boss, like, I was a consultant. I worked there for about a year. This guy named Darcy. I was in charge of a team of 30 people at the age of 21. So I got a job I was not qualified for. Yeah, and Darcy was the CTO, so he was my boss. I was the senior architect. Again, job I shouldn't have got it. And he pulled me aside. I remember day one, and he said, like, I'm giving you 2 weeks to figure this out. Somehow you got hired, or you're here, and you need to figure this out. And I went to the library. This is 2001, and read all about Gantt charts and PLC and product management and all this stuff that I would care to forget. But what Darcy taught me more than anything was what I've called the difference between transactional versus transformational leadership. So transactional, and a lot of first-time founders run into this, where they hire a person to add capacity, and they say, hey, do this, tell me when you're done, and they check it, and then they tell them what to do next, which sounds logical. It's like, I hired somebody, I got to manage them, so do this, check they got done, and tell them what to do next. What Darcy taught me at a young age, and I feel so grateful to learn this, because I've seen all my friends struggle with this, because you can do that for so long, you get to about 12 people, and then you realize you spend your whole day managing what they're doing, checking that it got done, and you don't actually have any time for yourself. What I learned back then was a difference, what I call transformational leadership, which is getting crystal clear on the outcome. Where are we going? Okay, like you said, like when you said the pothole example, I'm just gonna tell a funny story. I went backcountry snowmobiling with my brother last winter, and I'd never been on a snowmobile. I lied, said I was advanced on the form. We rented these machines and went out. Yeah. I was just like, yeah, expert. I was like, how do you start it? He's like, oh my gosh, start the button. Dangerous. Anyways. And I remember I eventually got the hang of it, but at one point I end up in a bush of trees underneath the bottom, like the whole machine went down. And he comes over and he looks around the field and he goes, why did you hit those trees? There's nothing else for like
you're looking at
thousands of meters. I was thinking to myself the whole time, don't go in there, don't go in there, don't go in there, don't go. And it's literally, you just see this line where the machine just went.
No.
So I'll tell you what you said, Amy, 100% true. If you look at it, you're going to end up hitting it. Yeah. But transformational leadership is outcome, crystal clear on where we're going, measure what data point are we going to use to personally assess our progress along this journey. And then the third is coach to success. That coach to success. Not criticize, not look for everything wrong, but actually create the opportunity, maybe through your one-on-ones or your weekly meetings with that person, to just say, what do you need from me? Where are you struggling? And use those opportunities to coach that person. Like the best leaders have team members. What I've always thought of is like even professional sports, like great coaches. You can take a great player on a team, but if you move them to a different team, they might actually not be as great because the coach knew how to place them properly. So I always think of my role of, I want that person to feel like they're doing their best work because I've enabled the environment for them to do that. And it's always being really clear on some exciting future and outcome that's good, positive, measure so that we're on the same page, knowing where we're at on that journey, and then making sure there's touch points throughout this kind of like pulse, meetings, rituals, routine, whatever you want to use, in regards to like the cadence. To make sure that they have the space to ask for support and help. And I think that is leadership at its best.
I think so too. And like, just to kind of, springboard off of what you were saying, leadership and management are two different things. There are great managers who will never be great leaders. There are great leaders who absolutely suck at management. And I happen to be one of those. But I think at the end of the day, great leadership is based on the whole concept of being able to inspire people to excellence, right? Which I think is what you're talking about, like getting people excited about what they're doing and wanting them to succeed, and not pigeonholing people and all of this, but inspiring them for like you were saying, for whatever role they're supposed to be. You as a leader want them to be absolutely excellent. Right. And so your job is to go out there and create excellence in your people by inspiring them to find out who they are and what they can contribute to the world and business and all of that. Am I right? Or am I putting words in your mouth?
No. Amy, I know you've done a lot, like the work you did at Entrepreneur Magazine. You've seen the entrepreneurs, and when you say there's a difference between management and like leaders, you're so right, because there's a lot of people, especially the ones that get promoted within the function, right? A developer, a salesperson, a marketer that's now supposed to like lead a department. They might be able to manage it, but they won't inspire. They won't do the outcome, the vision, really the coaching, right? They're good on spreadsheets. They're good on this is broken, but they're not going to get people through that. And I think great CEOs, great founders, they're more leaders than managers, right? And if they're smart enough and figure that out, they bring the people, they bring the Tim Cooks around the Steve Jobs. Exactly.
And so when you're working with, some founders are not born leaders, right? I mean, that's just a known. They might be great innovators. They might be creating important, disruptive things. But how do you coach, when you're working with a founder, how do you coach someone into great leadership? Like, is it something that can be taught? Or is it something that can be learned?
I think it's, first off, I got to figure out what I'm dealing with. Because as you know, Amy, sometimes some entrepreneurs are crazy. All entrepreneurs are crazy. There's a scale. Okay. So they're all crazy, and you are. So then it's how do you mitigate the craziness? Okay. So there are some people that literally should be removed from the team, more visionary, have a great integrator, operator, and that way they can go do their things that they love to do. And I don't know how Mark Zuckerberg is to work with, but like he brought in Sheryl Sandberg. She really runs Facebook. He gets to go do the acquisitions, the vision stuff. But for me, I always want to figure out what I'm working with in regards to the founder and their kind of like craziness, because the other mistake they make is they throw hand grenades in their business when things are good. Most entrepreneurs love chaos. So as soon as things are actually repeatable, scalable, and growing, they're like, whoa, let's change our business model. Let's redesign our website. Let's change the whole product strategy. It's like, stop throwing hand grenades in your business and let your team execute. But what I always say is you need to disconnect moment from conversation. So what a lot of reactive entrepreneurs do that is a bad habit is in the moment, they'll react to the situation when what they need to do is write it down, keep it for a little bit, and then use the right moment to then interact with the person to give them the feedback and the coaching. Incredibly hard for certain founders to do. So that would be the first tip. Disconnect the Slack message where you're like, why are they doing that? Don't interact. Don't go crazy. Write it. I have a Google Doc with all my direct reports. And every time I have an idea or I have something that I think they need to get some coaching on, I write it in the document so that when I do my one-on-ones, I say, what are you bringing to the meeting? They bring their list. And then I say, hey, I've got these 3 items I'd love to share with you. So that is probably the most universal strategy that I think will really serve people, because most founders are their craziness factor can cause a lot of churn. Like they're so driven, but at the same time, they're really hard to work with. Yeah. And if you can just stop being in the moment and don't worry about it. Some people think it's going to like reduce my superpower. Like that's my superpower. Steve Jobs was a dick. Yeah, he realized it did not scale and change his approach so that he could create an environment where he could still be critical, but it didn't cause people to want to quit. Like there's a nuance, and I think an evolution that if you can make the leap. Like I have always thought, Amy, the gold standard for an entrepreneur is you founded the company, you scaled it, you brought it public, and you're still CEO. Yeah. Those are like, to me, Bezos, Zuckerberg, Buffett, like that's rarefied air. If you ask me what's the all-star, it's whoever's on that level, because it is so hard for somebody to be self-aware enough to grow, because you have to grow. Like you are not the same person year over year as you make that trajectory.
Yeah, and it's also like when you're talking about the founders like Jobs and Bezos and all of these really cool people, you know, they're innovators and they're trailblazers and they're pioneers, but they are also excellent executors, right? Everything is about execution, and it doesn't matter. Like I just did a story on this company out of Denmark called Lepi. Have you heard of them? It's a female urinal, right, for festivals, right? Which are not happening right now, but you know, they had this great idea because women have to wait in line at music concerts, right? Like there's just a thing, go to the bathroom. And so they made this. I've
seen the lines.
Yeah, it's crazy. And they came up with this idea. It was beautiful. And, you know, it was a great idea. But what they made happen was the execution of that idea. And they went out and got, you know, they found the best manufacturers. They got, you know, good marketing intel. They created a team of collaborators who just believed in the vision. And but at the end of the day, I mean, I'm curious what you think on this, Dan, but at the end of the day, it's all about execution. Every single thing.
To me, it's always the results, like period, full stop. Did you get the outcome? All the other stuff is like input and process. But, you know, it's kind of like the way I think about it is, you know, baking a cake. Sequencing equals success, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, if I have the same list of ingredients, but I follow a different process, one person, if you split test it, you have one person that produces this beautiful cake and this other person that produces this pound of mush, right? Same ingredients, et cetera. But it's just, you need to make sure the outcome is achieved. How we get there is up to the team, but it's execution. Like I'm very much like, that's why I don't have a lot of patience, nor most entrepreneurs have patience for excuses. I just want to know that we have an outcome, and I want to know that you're a good person while you did it.
Right. You know, when I was an entrepreneur, we did this really interesting research, not to digress here. And I know we want to take some questions from the audience, but there is a delta, right? So you've got, like, you race cars, I race motorcycles. There's a delta, right, between people who become entrepreneurs for some reason because it is a hard path to take, and that adventurous adrenaline junkie, you know, you got to go out and do, and it's kind of the same thing. So, I mean, I don't know why I brought that up, other than people who become entrepreneurs and who are just innately born to be entrepreneurs are adventurous and they're experimental. And, they are not always the best at execution. And that's kind of what I've observed in my, like great ideas are great ideas, but getting it out to the world is the key. And that's how you get
and I think, Amy, it's important to be okay hiring people to do that. Like be literally just giving yourself permission to say, I'm really good at starting the first 10%, and then I really don't want to do it. So let me find something I follow through. It's just a beautiful thing.
Do that. Don't you think more people should actually come out and say, oh my God, I want it, but I'm not going to be good at executing this, right? And
they're worried that it's something they're supposed to be able to do, and it's just not. And it's just like, to me, I look at my day as energy management. Like I want to design my day efficiently so that I'm always doing the thing that lights me up the most. So I have a very structured day for that flow, and I'm okay asking for support in every other aspect of my life. It doesn't mean I'm incapable. It just means that and literally, because like my Sandy, who's been doing my personal bookkeeping, financial stuff for 20 years, she like loves spreadsheets, loves them. You know what I mean?
That's so weird.
And I remember,
that's so weird. That's weird. That's weird.
Yeah. So like there are literally people out there that love the thing that you hate to do. And when those two people come together, magic happens.
Yeah. I agree. I know we're almost out of time here. Brock, do we want to take some questions? Because honestly, there's nothing more than the questions people have, than anything we can say here.
Yes, we have some questions. So let me ask the first one. Just a second.
There's a lot of questions.
What are the 3 biggest mistakes you have ever made as a founder?
That's my question?
Yes, your question.
Definitely.
3 biggest mistakes. The biggest one. So let's quantify that on financial. The big one, when I built the company Flowtown, I built it around Facebook's API. And we scaled it to about 50K in MRR, raised $1 million in funding. And then Facebook changed their whole API, and essentially our product went to 0. So I'll never make that mistake again. And that's called concentration risk. I think it's anytime you have one partner or one critical point in your business that you have no control over but are critical to your business. So that's one, concentration risk. The other big mistake was a hire I made on my first successful company. I had 2 failures right off the bat, but the third company that was successful, I almost lost Procter & Gamble as a customer because I hired this guy that was supposed to be really smart and the pedigree and all this stuff, and I didn't put any mechanism in place to monitor and communicate. And 3 months into this big project that we sold, the customer calls me up and pretty much is about ready to fire our whole team because of this individual's incompetence. So I think just learning how to manage other people and setting up expectations and really doing background checks, all that stuff. I mean, hiring, I could do a whole 3-day conversation around people side of it. So that was a big one early in my career. I was about 26 when that happened. And then another mistake, I would say, never not asking for money when you don't need it. That's like a big one right now that it's a little late for me to tell you that, but you should always be trying to set up your capital structure before you ever need it, because when you need it, they don't give it to you. It's really this weird dynamic with banks and credit and stuff. So I pretty much, if I sell, like every time I've sold a company, I've went and got the biggest line of credit, for no reason. They're like, what do you need it for? I'm like, working capital. They're like, you don't have a business right now. I'm like, I will. So I would say those are the 3 biggest mistakes I made, because I almost lost my first company, Spirit, because of cash flow issues, and the bank wouldn't extend the line of credit. And that really pissed me off because we were doing well. We just had a cash flow problem. You can actually grow and run into issues because the growth is sucking so much capital out of the business if you can't fund it. I was 24 when I started that. I had no clue what cash flow was. So that's where I learned you should always ask for money when you don't need it.
Yeah.
How do you manage your time? Some insights and hints?
Well, so here's the thing with this is I'll tell you how I do it today, but for most people, they shouldn't do it this way because you're not me, okay? Like, it's just reality. It's like, I don't pattern match my life off of a billionaire because I'm not a billionaire. He's a billionaire. Okay. So if you're not in my position, you can go online, figure out, I've got a lot, I've done well. Like, I have a house manager and an assistant. She's got 2 assistants. Like, I've got a lot of, so don't manage your life like me. But I will say this, your morning ritual is so important. Time, like that's universal, right? So have a structure, and it could be one thing. Just start your day. I like gratitude journaling, so I do 5-minute journal. One of my favorite gifts to give, 5-minute journal. I do some meditation. I do some reviewing of my goals. I work out. I get my sweat on. So have your morning ritual, and that'll set your rest of your day up. So we don't even need to talk about like the productivity side. If you do that, you're 90% there. The rest of it you'll figure out because you'll feel so accomplished. You're like, what else could I do?
So another question is also a follow-up question from the earlier one. Why the companies fail in early stage?
Well, there's a lot of reasons, but simple is they don't find traction. But that's such a generic reason. I'll say this: most companies fail in the early days because they're scared to sell. Okay, so I've always pre-sold my product before I ever built it. I think the highest risk in any business is deploying resources, capital, people's time, etc. Building something for somebody that nobody ever wanted because you sat there in this super uninformed, optimistic state. It's so much fun. It's like literally the funnest thing to have a couple drinks, stay up late on a Saturday night with your friend and talk about all these possibilities. It's like the coolest thing in the world. What's not cool is spending your life savings in 6 months of your effort to find out that nobody actually wanted the thing that you built. So that to me.
Can I add to that, Dan? Can I just add something? One of the things when I'm sitting in as a jury member and as a 3 times failed entrepreneur myself, the most important thing, especially when you are raising capital or you are trying to tell your story, is the clarity of your vision. You need to be able to state what you are doing in 3 sentences or less, right? Otherwise, people get confused and you have too many words and the story gets obscured. So that clarity is really key to not failing. I mean, you can have clarity and still fail, but that clarity of vision is what I've seen and observed in all the entrepreneurs I've written stories about. So I would just add that to the conversation.
Brock, can I share this? Because I don't feel good about this productivity habit thing. I'm going to share this, okay? Because this is a big unlock for me growing up. Is again, do what you do. Like, if you ask me what did I do to be successful, I became obsessed. I allowed myself to be obsessed, and I put in the hours. Okay, like just put in the hours. There wasn't no like 100 hours a week, 70 hours. It's just like you just work, right? And the way I looked at it, that finally, because my parents and my friends couldn't understand, like, Dan, why are you doing this? What are you trying to accomplish? And at one point, I just said, guys, you're giving me a hard time, but if I was an Olympic athlete and I was training for the Olympics and I was training, the work equivalent to training, all of you would be praising me for my work ethic, for going to practice, for training. But you guys can't see my Olympics. I see it clear as day. You'll never understand it. It's not part of your reality. You don't understand why people would go for that. And that's okay, but treat me like an athlete, because that's what I am, because that's what it takes. And I feel like that's the mindset that if you want success and you're not there, you almost need to become obsessed with that outcome and train with the rigor, feedback cycle, coaching, training, perfect practice as you would an Olympic athlete. And if you're not willing to do that, go work for somebody cool. That's literally my answer. Go work for somebody that you admire, because that's what it's going to take.
How do you measure your daily value creation? Like, I mean, you tell right now.
Well, have you seen my video on that? Is that why you asked that question?
That is right.
It's a great question. Yeah, I mean, the way I think of like, we all have the same amount of time, right? What's funny is that if I took somebody's 40 hour and I said, poof, you've got 40 extra hours, they wouldn't know what to do with it. So I think it's really important to understand, like, what is my time worth for different activities? So the easiest way to explain it, and I got this from my buddy Todd Herman. He wrote a great book called Alter Ego, but he is an incredible strategic thinker, period. And he taught me this thing called the Entrepreneurial Scorecard. Essentially, it's 4 columns, right? You have $10 tasks, $100 tasks, $500 tasks, $5,000 tasks, value creation. And if you just think of like your annual goal for the year, if it's $1 million, then you essentially need to create $5,000 worth of value every day, because there's about 200 working days in a year, give or take, you know, holidays, weekends, whatever. So every day has to be a $5,000 an hour. Well, you're not going to get there by doing $10 tasks, right? So this is where people confuse hustle, working with what we talked about earlier, Amy, results, execution. So for me, I look at my calendar in regards to the value of that creation. So I today spend most of my time in the strategic column because my goals are pretty ambitious. And some of it is in the $500 column, which is more project management. So there's like pretty much $10 task admin, doing the work, that's $100. You can pay anybody $100 to do work. And then you got 500, which is management strategy. And then you have, or not just management project documentation. And then the 5,000 is really strategy. But here's the thing on the strategy. So every Friday is a full day of strategic thinking. I call it empire building day. Again, I can do that because I don't have to work. You do, so you, and not you guys, but like everybody listening, you have to put in the time. So you don't get that right off the bat. You can get Saturday morning for 2 hours. That's where I started. Every Saturday morning was empire building time. And what I do is I write down in my journal ideas that come to me throughout the week, okay? And I review them and I ponder them and I think about it. Because here's what I believe, Barack and Amy, I believe I already know everybody I need to know to accomplish anything. Anything I want to do, I already know the people, I already have all the resources, and my job is to be creative enough to figure it out. And I need to give myself the thinking time in my schedule to doodle and let things be presented to me and just explore them and pull on the thread and go, oh, that's interesting. So that to me is how I tried the 5,000 an hour. But for a lot of people, they won't be there. You just got to move your way up the stack. So if you don't have an admin or exec assistant or office manager, whatever you want to call them, then you are that person. And that's a low paying job for somebody that's running a company. You need to work your way up the value stack.
Great. There are lots of questions about the startup, how to raise funds, how to exit. You have been angel investor, also a founder. You have lots of experience. So how to create a fundraising story, or how to exit them should be our one of the last questions, because we are coming to our interview last minutes.
Yeah. So I've exited the last 3 of my companies, and I've been involved in about 400 million in transactions. So I do a lot of this. It's pretty much, most of the clients I coach, I call it the perfect exit. You know, we start with that outcome, back to the outcome. It's like, what is the perfect exit for you? Public offering, strategic buyer, or hiring a CEO to run the company. Pick one. That's what we're building towards. And for the ones that want to exit to a strategic, for example, Jonathan at Sales Autopilot, he just sold for, a lot of money, like what multi-generational wealth. That's, I want people to understand, a lot of multi-generational is different, than buying a really nice house and a car. Anyways, the way we did that is literally every SaaS technology marketplace business, there's certain economic principles. There's a great book called Lean Analytics. If you want to know what they are for your industry, go read Lean Analytics by Alistair and Ben Yoskovitz. But they'll tell you, like, these are the ways that people value the business. And really the cool part is there's a valuation calculator for all businesses. And if you know what you want as an outcome, and you know where you're at today, and you know what's valuable, because most people don't know what the value drivers are in a business. They don't know what the value detractors are. So the funny part is you've got both. And it's like when my friend wanted to sell his home building company, I asked him, well, how many home building companies sold last year? He's like, I don't know. Well, you don't even know if there's a market for it. So like and he said, I'm going to spend the next 10 years building this business and I'm going to sell it. And I'm like, well, if there's nobody buying, then why would you spend 10 years building something that nobody buys? Like, literally, he's like, oh shit. I was like, yeah, like you don't go find out. And then if there is a buyer, you should find out the one that just bought the other guy and say, what did you value about the home building company you bought? Because you might go build value that's not valuable to anybody, right? So I would just say, once you do that, then there's companies you can hire to run processes. They're called sell-side M&A firms, and they'll run you through the process. But the big thing, Barack, and like for me, is I build companies to build companies. I've never built a company to sell a company. Selling the company was an opportunity that made sense based on market risk, et cetera. I've always focused 100% on creating value for my customers and building a world-class team, because you hear it all the time. It's not the destination, it's the journey. It really is the journey, man. Like, I know that you think it's the destination, but I say this all the time. Just if I go out and put $1 million in your bank account, guess what? You're not a millionaire in my books. My books. You're a millionaire to the IRS. You're a millionaire to everybody else technically. But in my books, if you didn't know how to create that $1 million, which is the journey and the growth and the personal development, then you're going to give it back. That's why every professional athlete eventually ends up bankrupt. Most people that win the lottery end up giving it back in 3 years because they did not become the millionaire, if that makes sense. So I'm a big fan of literally have big ambitious goals, but know that the destination is going to be empty. And the real fun is appreciating that journey and the ups and downs. And that's why I can be really grateful for what we're going through now, because I'm grateful I get to learn a whole new set of skills that I didn't have prior to COVID-19. That's the truth.
Amy and Dan, thank you very much for this valuable and insightful interview. I now invite you to Turkey to
I've been. I love Turkey.
Turkey's
Turkish tea.
That's my family. They're awesome, Dan. You have to go. It is the best country in the world.
So thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you.
And also thank you. We will be very happy to see you in our next events. This is an actual invite for hopefully after this outbreak.
Let me know, Barak. I'll be there. Amy, nice meeting you.
Bye-bye.
Nice
Later,
to
everybody.
meet you. Cheers,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Bye-bye.